Hello, dear one. Welcome back to another episode of Pinocchio. That's almost too high for me to sing. What about you? All right, so we're getting close to the end. This is chapter 33. If you remember last time, Pinocchio and Lampwick were becoming donkeys. Why would that happen? And then there was the man at the door. Chapter 33. Pinocchio, having become a donkey, is bought by the owner of a circus. Well, that sounds fun. Aren't circuses fun? The donkey becomes lame and is sold to a man who wants to use his skin for a drumhead. What? Do you see Pinocchio there in the picture? That's Pinocchio. He has turned into a donkey. Look at his hands. Well, they're not hands anymore. They're hooves. Look at his face. Does he look happy to be a donkey? No. In fact, the very first words are, "Very sad and downcast were the two poor little fellows as they stood and looked at each other." That's Pinocchio and Lampwick. Outside the room, the little man grew more and more impatient and finally gave the door such a violent kick that it flew open. With his usual sweet smile on his lips, he looked at Pinocchio and Lampwick and said to them, "Fine work, boys. You have brayed well, so well that I recognized your voices, and here I am." On hearing this, the two donkeys bowed their heads in shame, dropped their ears, and put their tails between their legs. At first, the little man petted them and smoothed their hairy coats. Then he took out a currycomb and worked over them until they shone like glass. Satisfied, he bridled them. You know what a bridle is? That's that thing they put over like a horse or a donkey's face, then put the bit in the mouth, and then they can lead them wherever they want to. Bridled them and took them to a marketplace far away from the land of toys in the hope of selling them at a good price. Well, wow. In fact, he did not have to wait very long for an offer. Lampwick was bought by a farmer whose donkey had died the day before. Pinocchio went to the owner of a circus who wanted to teach him to do tricks for his audiences. Oh, Pinocchio's not going to watch the circus. Pinocchio's going to be in the circus. And now do you understand what the little man's profession was? This horrid little being, whose face shone with kindness, went about the world looking for boys. Lazy boys. Boys who hated books. Boys who wanted to run away from home. Boys who were tired of school. All these were his joy and his fortune. He took them with him to the land of toys and let them enjoy themselves to their heart's content. When, after months of all play and no work, they became little donkeys, little asses, he sold them in the marketplace. In a few years, he had become a millionaire. He turns the boys into slaves, dear one. Do you understand? What happened to Lampwick? My dear children, I do not know. Pinocchio, I can tell you, met with great hardships, even from the first day. After putting him in a stable, his new master filled his manger with straw. But Pinocchio, after tasting a mouthful, spat it out. The man filled the manger with hay, but Pinocchio did not like that any better. "Ah, you don't like hay either," he cried. "Wait, my pretty donkey. I'll teach you not to be so particular." He took a whip and gave the donkey a hearty blow across the legs. Pinocchio screamed with pain as he screamed and brayed, "Ha, ha, ha! I can't digest straw." "Then eat hay," answered his master, who understood the donkey perfectly. "Ha, ha, ha! Hay gives me a headache." "Do you pretend by any chance that I should feed you duck or chicken?" asked the man again. and again, angrier than ever, he gave poor Pinocchio another lashing. Pinocchio became very quiet and said no more. After that, the door of the stable was closed and he was left alone. It was many hours since he had eaten anything, and he started to yawn from hunger. Finally, not finding anything else in the manger, he tasted the hay. This hay's not so bad, he said, but how much happier I should be if I had studied. Instead of hay, I should be eating good bread and butter. Patience. The next morning when he awoke, Pinocchio looked in the manger for more hay, but it was all gone. He tried the straw, but noticed to his great disappointment that it tasted neither like rice nor like macaroni. Patience, he repeated. If only my misfortune might serve as a lesson to disobedient boys who refuse to study. Patience. Let's change the picture. Here's the full page picture. This is the page I'm reading from right now. So there's the man with in charge of the circus with the whip and the spurs. And let's look what it says. He's got a poster. It says grand full something performance tonight. The usual daring feats and astonishing performances by all the artists and by all the horses of the fine company. In addition, the first appearance of the famous little donkey Pinocchio, called the star of the dance. There we go. Patience indeed, shouted his master just then as he came into the stable. Do you think perhaps, my little donkey, that I have brought you here only to give you food and drink? Oh no, you are to help me earn some fine gold pieces. Do you hear? Come along now. I am going to teach you to jump and bow and dance and waltz and a polka, and even to stand on your head. Poor Pinocchio, whether he liked it or not, had to learn all those wonderful things. But it took him 3 long months and cost him many, many lashings before he was pronounced perfect. The day came at last when Pinocchio's master was able to announce an extraordinary performance. The announcements, posted all around the town and written in large letters, read thus. Oh, here's what it says in the book that's actually on the poster that we just read. Read it together with me. Grand full dress performance tonight. The usual daring feats and astonishing performances by all the artists and by all the horses of the grand company. In addition, the first appearance of the famous little donkey Pinocchio, called the star of the dance. That night, as you can well imagine, the theater was filled to overflowing. Not an orchestra chair could be had, not a balcony seat, nor a gallery seat, not even for their weight in gold. The place swarmed with boys and girls of all ages, wiggling and dancing about in a fever of impatience to see the famous donkey dance. When the first part of the performance was over, the owner and manager of the circus, in a black coat with white knee breeches, it looks like it, and patent leather boots, I'm looking at the picture, yeah, that's him, presented himself to the public and in a loud, pompous voice made the following announcement. Most honored friends, ladies and gentlemen, your humble servant, the manager of this theater, presents himself before you tonight in order to introduce you to the greatest, the most famous donkey in the world. A donkey that has had the great honor in his short life of performing before kings and queens and emperors of all the great courts of Europe. We thank you for your attention. This speech was greeted by much laughter and applause, and the applause grew to a roar when Pinocchio, the famous donkey, appeared in the circus ring. Maybe it's time for the next picture. Here's Pinocchio in the circus ring. He was handsomely arrayed. A new bridle of shining leather with buckles of polished brass was on his back. 2 white camellias were tied to his ears. I don't know what those are, but they look like ribbons. Maybe they're earrings. Oh no, ribbons and tassels of red silk adorned his mane. I see those. Which was divided into many curls. A great sash of gold and silver was fastened around his waist, and his tail was decorated with ribbons of many brilliant colors. I see red and blue. How about you? He was a handsome donkey indeed. The manager, when introducing him to the public, added these words: "Most honored audience, I shall not take your time tonight to tell you of the great difficulties which I have encountered while trying to tame this animal, since I found him in the wilds of Africa. Observe, I beg of you, the savage look in his eye. All the means used by centuries of civilization in subduing wild beasts failed in this case. I finally had to resort to the gentle language of the whip in order to bring him to my will. With all my kindness, however, I never succeeded in gaining my donkey's love. He is still today as savage as the day I found him. He still fears and hates me, but I have found in him one great redeeming feature. Do you see this little bump on his forehead? It is this bump which gives him his great talent of dancing and using his feet as nimbly as a human being. Admire him, O signori, and enjoy yourselves. I let you now be the judges of my success as a teacher of animals. Before I leave you, I wish to state that there will be another performance tomorrow night. If the weather threatens rain, the great spectacle will take place at 11 o'clock in the morning." The manager bowed and then turned to Pinocchio and said, "Ready, Pinocchio. Before starting your performance, salute your audience." Pinocchio obediently bent his 2 knees to the ground, then remained kneeling until the manager, with a crack of his whip, cried sharply, "Walk!" The donkey lifted himself on his 4 feet and walked around the ring. A few minutes passed, and again the voice of the manager called, "Quick step!" And Pinocchio obediently changed his step. "Gallop!" And Pinocchio galloped. That's probably what he's doing there in the picture. "Full speed!" And Pinocchio ran as fast as he could. As he ran, the master raised his arm and a pistol shot rang in the air. At the shot, the little donkey fell to the ground as if he were really dead. A shower of applause greeted the donkey as he arose to his feet. Cries and shouts and hand clappings were heard on all sides. At that noise, Pinocchio lifted his head and raised his eyes. There in front of him, in a box, sat a beautiful woman. I think the words are on the screen. Around her neck she wore a long gold chain, from which hung a large medallion. On the medallion was painted the picture of a marionette. "That picture is of me. That beautiful lady is my fairy," said Pinocchio to himself. He felt so happy that he tried his best to cry out, "Oh, my fairy, my own fairy!" But instead of words, a loud braying was heard in the theater, so loud and so long that all the spectators burst out laughing. Then, in order to teach the donkey that it was not good manners to bray before the public, the manager hit him on the nose with the handle of the whip. The poor little donkey stuck out a long tongue and licked his nose for a long time in an effort to take away the pain. And what was his grief when, on looking up towards the boxes, he saw that the fairy had disappeared. He felt himself fainting. His eyes filled with tears, and he wept bitterly. No one knew it, least of all the manager, who, cracking his whip, cried out, "Bravo, Pinocchio! Now show us how gracefully you can jump through the rings." Pinocchio tried 2 or 3 times, but each time he came near the ring, he found it more to his taste to go under it. The 4th time, at a look from his master, he leaped through it. But as he did so, his hind legs caught in the ring, and he fell to the floor in a heap. When he got up, he was lame and could hardly limp as far as the stable. "Pinocchio! We want Pinocchio! We want the little donkey!" cried the boys from the orchestra, saddened by the accident. No one saw Pinocchio again that evening. The next morning, the veterinary, that is, the animal doctor, declared that he would be lame for the rest of his life. "What do I want with a lame donkey?" said the manager to the stable boy. "Take him to the market and sell him." When they reached the square, a buyer was soon found. "How much do you ask for that little lame donkey?" he asked. $4. "I'll give you 4 cents. Don't think I'm buying him for work. I want only his skin. It looks very tough, and I can use it to make myself a drum head. A drum head. The part of a drum that you pound on that makes the noise. I belong to a musical band in my village, and I need a drum. I leave it to you, my dear children, to picture to yourself the great pleasure with which Pinocchio heard that he was to become a drumhead. No, not pleasure at all. It's horrible. As soon as the buyer had paid the 4 cents, the donkey changed hands. His new owner took him to a high cliff overlooking the sea, put a stone around his neck, tied a rope to one of his hind feet, and threw him into the water. Pinocchio sank immediately, and his new master sat on the cliff, waiting for him to drown, so to skin him and make himself a drumhead. That's the end, dear one, of chapter 33. Now, don't be too alarmed. It sounds like Pinocchio is dead. But there is a chapter 34. But you'll have to wait until next time. Bye-bye.